Hello, my name is Shantell Jackson. Coming to you live from my downtown studio apartment. So I am here to tell a story about Unintended. That's the topic. So, 15 years ago, I graduated from college with a bachelor's in political science and history. Had to think about that. And it took me a while when I say a while, it took me a few months to get a full-time job in an unrelated field. I moved from Buffalo, New York to the beautiful state of Washington. So let's talk about unintended number one, which is kind of embarrassing for me, but it makes for a funny story. So number one, when I was doing a job search, I didn't know that, I knew that there was a Washington state. However, I did not know that the job that I was applying for and would be interviewed for would be in Washington state. Being from the East Coast, I thought it was in Washington. That's how we say Washington. It's like, well, it's Washington, meaning DC. So my mother had to do some further investigation about, like, where are we talking, Washington State or are we talking DC? Because those are two very different places. There is Seattle, Washington, and there is Washington. And so I did some research and learned of a place called, at the time I called it Spokane, Washington. And I was quickly corrected. It is Spokane, Washington. Anyways, that was like unintended number one. I thought that I was going to stay on the East Coast, but I ended up getting the job here at a university here in Washington State. And I spent 15 years working at EWU. In a career as a housing professional, a student affairs professional, and I did some of everything. So that's just kind of a little bit of my professional career background. But really the point, one of the main points of this story is, or I guess where the story will begin, really truly begin, is I think it was around 2007. I received a phone call from my dad, and we have a relationship in that we know each other. I spent time with him growing up as a child, but he wasn't really in my life. And I had moved to Washington. I had been here since 2004. So it's been like 3.5 years at this point. And I hadn't talked to him in years. I can't even remember the last time we had talked. And it brought up a lot of emotion for me because he did this thing where it was a lot of, I'm so proud of you. One, he called like a week early for my birthday to tell me happy birthday. So that was like, okay, well, it's not my birthday, but whatever. Like, I'm used to this type of behavior. And it was like, hey, we really want to come see you. We're so proud of you. It was a lot of promises and hopes for what a future could look like, of repairing and rebuilding a relationship that has always sort of been strained. And it made me feel a certain kind of way, and I couldn't quite identify what it was. I mean, it was disappointment, it was hurt, because maybe I knew that maybe while his intention was pure, true, that sorry. My cat, I have a string on my phone and my cat just pulled it away. Okay, y'all said no edits, so we're going with it. We are going with it. That was unintended. Okay. Leave it to a cat, man. Okay, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Unintended, doing videos with cats. Like, will you finish? Okay. Okay, that was like not as funny as I am putting it out there, but that was pretty classic. Anyways, so it really got me to thinking, and it brought up a lot of emotions from being a teenager and being a child, and which we had spent time, but that time spent together was often met with like disappointment. And as a child, you don't really know or understand the lives and worlds of adults, as you really shouldn't have to be, right? Like you shouldn't have to think about that, right? Like their focus should be you. People with children know they don't always necessarily care about you. So fast forward, that day I took a trip to the campus bookstore, picked up some canvas, picked up some paint, picked up some brushes, and I painted. And it was nonstop. I have stacks on stacks on stacks of canvas from those years that, well, one, just that week. Well, it wasn't stacks on stacks in that week, but I had so many canvas that I just was going through. I was just painting, and I think I was painting to help me process and evoke something that wouldn't come to me. And so I didn't know that it would lead to this robust passion of creating, and creating as a means of process, not necessarily always the outcome. And when those intense swells of emotions come up, it was a way to process. And what it has led to is not necessarily, 15 years later, but in 2020, I made a decision to leave my job of 15 years and pursue my creativity full time. And what would that be like? And so visual art wasn't really a part of my plan. And I can think of like many things that have been unintended, but visual art was not one of them. And now here I am trying to pursue something full time. And I feel hopeful that there is some really great opportunities, unfortunately, but fortunately, in our current state of affairs, for creativity. And I think that that people need the minds, the heart, the emotion of creatives on so many different levels right now. And it feels like it's the call to create and really create spaces for healing, because that's what it has been for me. And from that time in 2007 until now, creating for me, I didn't know that it would be this space for healing. And so now what I would love to do, and what I hope that my work does, be it visual art or poetry, is that it creates space for healing, whether it be healing within self, healing externally, healing between communities and cultures, which takes radical truth, and it takes radical forgiveness. And yeah, so my story on Unintended, plot twist, cats. I mean, that's the story, right? But really taking pain and turning it into a space of healing. Thank you. And here we go again. Now he's making noise. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope to tell stories in the future and share. And bring healing. Thank you.